Hi everyone and welcome to my new video. So today we are going to be setting up my bullet journal for June and I'm really excited about this theme. Let's start right away with my cover page. I decided to cut out these Dutch doors with tabs because I hadn't made them in a very long time and I thought it would suit this theme well. I cut the other pages before I started filming just to save some time, so I'm showing you only how I cut the cover page. I made a little bit bigger tabs this time because I cut out only 3 of them and I think the length of the tab was 9 dots on the left side, if that makes sense. I also rounded the corners of the pages with my corner cutter because I like that softer look, and this corner cutter is definitely a must-have for me because it makes the cutting process a lot quicker and the corners also look better compared to how I would cut them with scissors. Now let's get into the illustration itself. I wanted to do some kind of travel theme because I'm going to be traveling to Berlin in June to visit my sister, and I'm so excited about this trip because I haven't seen her in a couple of months. I will probably make another travel journal video about the trip, but we will see. If you have any recommendations on places to see in Berlin or favorite stationery stores, definitely let me know in the comments. I haven't planned my trip yet, but we'll try to do that over the weekend if I have the time. Anyway, I decided to draw this simple plain illustration with clouds on my cover page, and I also added some flowers on the sides because the page would have looked too empty otherwise. First I was thinking about doing a cover page with small travel related doodles, but that didn't work out like I wanted, so I ended up drawing this instead, and I'm really happy with how it turned out because it was easier to create a cohesive color palette for this one. I used pigma micron fineliners in 3 different sizes for the outlines. For the main outlines I used the size 03, and for the airplane and the flowers I used thinner 01. I wanted the clouds to look softer and blend more in the background, so I used the size 005 for outlining them. I also decided to go for this more sketchy kind of line art again, because I was nervous about drawing the outlines of the window with a solid line, as drawing a symmetrical oval shape without any kind of tool is quite difficult. Now looking back, I probably would outline the window with a more solid line so it would stand out from the landscape, but I think it looks okay the way it is too. I was looking at a reference picture to get the shape of the window and airplane right, and the plane wing especially would have been difficult to draw without it. I also used the dots on my notebook in advantage when I was sketching the window, so it would look as symmetrical as possible. For the flowers I added some line shading in the petals so they would look a bit more dimensional, and these are actually the same kind of flowers that I drew in my May setup as well. I thought they would look cute in this setup too, so I decided to recreate them, and I also was too lazy to come up with a different flower design. Sometimes it's nice to repeat the things you know you can draw well and also enjoy drawing them. Anyway, for the coloring I decided to use colored pencils again because I wanted to do a gradient in the sky, and doing that with markers would have been very challenging, and I didn't want to use watercolors or gouache either because the paper could have wrinkled and I don't really like that. I actually did use watercolor pencils on my bullet journal a few years ago, and the main reason why I stopped using them was the texture of the paper after the water had dried, because it felt quite rough and looked wrinkly. I think mixing colors can be quite difficult as well, especially if you try to mix similar colors later after the first ones are used up, so that's why I gravitated more towards markers and colored pencils. I'm definitely not a pro when it comes to colored pencils either, as I'm still learning, but I think I can get a nice finish with them. For the gradient I did very light layers first with a couple different colors and blended them together by overlapping the colors on areas where the color changes. Then I just slowly darkened up the colors by adding more layers on top of each other, and I also used a bit more pressure on the last layers to get a darker look. My biggest tip with colored pencils is to start with a very light pressure and use a lot of layers because it's easier to mix the colors that way and get a more blended look. If you start off with a lot of pressure, it's very difficult to add different colors on top or even erase the coloring if you happen to make a mistake. To make the clouds and the plane stand out from the background, I added some shadows and round them, and after that I started working on the clouds themselves. First I decided to use this burnt orange color for the clouds that are on the bottom and decided to mix some blue in them as well, but I actually didn't end up liking the orange color, so I erased that later. When I was coloring the clouds, I mainly focused on adding shadows on the left side, so the clouds would still look quite white and fluffy. I also tried to make the clouds on the bottom darker because they are a bit closer. I used some dark purple very lightly to add more depth to the shadows and blended that with the lighter blue, and working on these clouds took quite a long time because I tried to add the colors very slowly to avoid making mistakes. By the way, you could definitely make this cover page a bit differently and add a cutout on the window and draw the landscape on the page underneath. I was thinking about that but decided not to do it this time because the cutout would have been quite small, and I also wanted to save some time because I knew this theme would be quite drawing heavy. This cover page took maybe about 1.5 hours if I remember right, and the whole theme took about 4.5 hours. I think the gradient sky turned out quite well and I like the clouds too, but the plain wing might have stood out a little bit better if I had left it a bit lighter, because now it blends a little bit on the clouds. But that's fine, and this was a good learning experience for me, especially because I don't think I've ever done a gradient with colored pencils before. For the window I used some light grey so it would stand out a little bit more, and I also decided to color the moon with my gold jelly roll because I love how shiny it is. I also added that on the numbers on top, but wouldn't probably do it again because I think they would have looked better without it. Anyway, for the flowers I decided to use the same cool toned pink that I used on the sky, so the color scheme would be nice and cohesive. I think these flowers look really cute with any color, so definitely feel free to experiment. Last month I made them blue and that looked really pretty as well. I used 2 different shades of green for the leaves so they would have a little bit more depth, and mainly focused on the bottom parts of the leaves, leaving a little bit of white on the thinnest part of the leaf. I also added some golden sparkles and more shadows around the clouds and wing on the illustration, just to add a bit more dimension because I felt like they didn't stand out enough. This illustration is slowly coming together and I'm almost finished, but I decided to add this light grey grid behind the flowers as I really liked how that looked on my May theme. If you haven't seen that one yet, definitely check it out as I think it turned out really cute. And I will link it in the description and in the end screen so you can watch that after this video. I've been doing more animal themes this year and also experimenting a bit more with colors, and I'm really happy about that because even though I love neutral colors, I started to feel like the color palette was limiting my creativity a bit, so that's why I've been adding colors back to my journal this year. Anyway, as a last step I decided to add some white highlights on the top parts of the clouds because I felt like they really needed that. After I was done with the illustration, I started decorating the tabs with washi tape, and I was really indecisive when I was choosing which washi tapes I wanted to use, because I wasn't sure which one suited the color scheme the best. I chose this light pink one for the tabs, and then realized that I probably should have chosen the washi tape that I wanted to add behind them first, but oh well. I tried out 3 different washi tapes behind the Dutch doors as well. 2 were this kind of maroon color and 1 was a bit more light neutral. I ended up going with the first option because I didn't want the washi tape to have any pattern, as I already had a grid on the tabs, and I think this maroon gradient worked the best with the colors. This washi tape is from Notebook Therapy, by the way, and the grid one is from the washi tape shop. And I have listed all the supplies I used in the description as always, so definitely check that out. And you can also find my affiliate codes there, which give you a 10% discount. Now let's move on to the page on the left. Instead of a quote page, I wanted to do a summer bucket list, because a bucket list is a great way to get more excited about the changing seasons, at least for me. I would love to hear what's on your summer bucket list, so definitely let me know. I listed some outdoor activities like swimming and play mini golf here, but I would also love to have a road trip somewhere and go to an amusement park this summer, as I haven't been to a one in few years. I love amusement parks, and roller coasters are probably my favorites there. Spinning rides are not my favorite because that can make me nauseous, even though I don't get that very easily, and I'm also afraid that someone else gets nauseous in them, so better to avoid them, I guess. Anyway, now that my cover spread is ready, we can move on to my monthly spread. I decided to use the same kind of layout as I did last month because that worked really well for me. On the top left corner I added the June title, and I also decided to add these flowers around it, so it kind of has like a flower wreath. These again are really basic flowers that I think anyone can do, and instead of having a stem I just added some leaves on the both sides of the flowers. I could do a YouTube short tutorial on these if you want, so let me know if you would like to see that. I know I also promised to make a short on how I draw capybaras, and that's definitely coming at some point as well. I've just tried to focus on doing other things this month, so I haven't had the time to film it yet, but hopefully will sometime in June after my trip to Berlin. I also should start setting up my next bullet journal at some point, but this journal still has quite a lot of pages, so I will probably use it in July as well. I just ordered my new journal, so we will see when it arrives. I decided to go for a bit smaller size because it has less pages, and I'm really excited to see how it will work for me. I've been always using the A5 size, so using a different size can definitely be challenging at first. I would love to hear which journal size you are using and which one you prefer. I definitely wouldn't use a bigger size than A5 because it's more difficult to carry with you. Anyway, if you would like to see which journal I'm choosing to use next and would like to hear how it will work for me, definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already. On the bottom of the spread, I decided to draw some travel-related items like passport and sunglasses. I really like themes where you can draw lots of different things, and I think that might be a bit more interesting to watch as well, because I'm not doing the same thing over and over again. Like I mentioned earlier, I was first going to draw these kinds of things on my cover page, and that didn't work out like I wanted, but I still like the doodles, so I wanted to incorporate them in this theme somehow, and this spread was the perfect place for that. I recently started crocheting again and made a bag with these kinds of 3D daisies. I'll try to remember to add a picture of that somewhere. Anyway, I loved how that bag turned out, so I decided to draw that in my bullet journal as well. I just ended up using different colors for that, so the color palette would be more cohesive. I would love to hear what kind of hobbies you have. I've always loved doing creative things, and I, for example, played piano for 10 years, but now I haven't played that in about 2 years, I think. I would love to get back to it and learn some Studio Ghibli theme songs at some point, but we will see. I've also always loved knitting and crocheting, but I'm very impatient when it comes to bigger projects, so this bag that I crocheted is probably the biggest thing I've ever done, and it took about a week. I tried to knit a top when I was in elementary school, but lost interest very fast, and I also tried to crochet a granny square blanket one time, but again lost interest, and my mom finished both of these projects. So now I know myself better and stick to smaller projects. If you knit or crochet and have favorite patterns or content creators about that, let me know in the comments. Anyway, I added this light grey grid behind these doodles as well, because I like how it kind of ties them together, if that makes sense. I also added that behind the flowers I drew earlier, but cut that part out of the video because it wouldn't have been that interesting. On the right side I made my habit tracker, and I drew these same pink flowers next to the title, because that was basically the only area where I had enough space for decorations. I've been doing quite well with my habits for the last couple of months, and I'm very happy about that. I'm not going to write out the habits in this video again, because I want to be more intentional about the things I track, but in case you are interested in what I usually track, I've shown that in my earlier videos, like in January I think. This month I've been tracking my sleeping schedule, which has been very good for me as I tend to be a night owl, so tracking my bedtime hours helps to keep a more reasonable sleeping schedule. I track quite a lot of habits, but all of these aren't something I try to do every day, because for me it's really important to track things I do just for fun. Otherwise I would start overachieving things, and that's not really good for my perfectionism. Habit tracking doesn't have to be that serious, and doing it perfectly shouldn't be the main goal, as it's better to focus on doing your best and reflect if the things you are doing are actually good for you. The daily habits I track are usually taking my vitamins and making my bed in the morning, and the things I track just for fun usually have something to do with the activities I enjoy doing, like art or exercising. I used to track reading as well, but I felt like I was tracking it just because I felt like I should read, but that tracker always ended up looking empty and I felt bad about it, so these days I just have accepted that I don't read and enjoy doing other things instead, so I don't have to add that in my habit tracker either. Anyway, now we are setting up my one line a day and favorite spread. And if you don't know what one line a day page is, I will just write something about my day here that I would like to remember later. Usually this is one positive thing that happened or something I did during that day. On the favorites page I will write my monthly favorite things and moments, and in May my favorite thing was definitely crocheting, as that's basically all I wanted to do all the time. I've been also listening a lot of Taylor Swift's Evermore album. I would love to hear which things were your favorites this month, so definitely let me know in the comments. Because my wrist was getting a bit tired from all the drawing, I decided to use these stickers that I made earlier this year for decorating the bottom right corner. I also used these pink flower stickers that I bought from Monica and outlined this spread with my gold jelly roll. This spread was really simple and it didn't take too much time. Now let's move on to my last spread, which is going to be my weekly spreads for the first 2 weeks of June. I actually didn't use the weekly spreads at all in May, but was missing them a little bit because I noticed that my mind felt a bit more cluttered. I usually use my weekly spreads for writing the daily to-do lists and what I did during that day, and I found that now that I didn't have them, I was forgetting small tasks I had to do because I only wrote them in my monthly spread, which I don't use that often. For June, I wanted to make the first 2 weekly spreads, and I will see later if I feel like doing the rest as well. I will use the same layout with 4 boxes for both of them, as it usually works really well for me. I didn't want to spend too much time on this spread just because I was feeling a bit tired after making the first 2 spreads, as they were quite drawing heavy, so I decided to use these stickers, which again are from ochre for decorations. I felt like these suited the travel theme really well, especially because I will probably take a lot of photos and journal about my trip afterwards. I felt like there was too much empty space between the stickers, so I ended up drawing these same flowers again, and I didn't even sketch them at this point because I had already drawn them so many times that I knew they would turn out fine. I think having small repeating doodles in your theme is a good way to make the spreads cohesive, and I also like to use the same color palette as that makes everything go well together. Drawing the same kind of landscape that I did on my cover page in every spread would have taken forever, and it wouldn't have been that fun either. So drawing small doodles and adding stickers worked really well for me, and that was also a good way to make sure that my wrist wouldn't get too tired. My wrist has been doing fine this year, by the way, which I'm very happy about, as I was struggling with it last year around this time. I don't really know what has changed. I guess it might be because I'm quicker with editing these days, so I don't use my Apple mouse that much. I still need to get a new mouse, as the Apple one isn't great and wouldn't recommend that to anyone. I mean, it looks nice and works well, but it's really bad for the wrist. Anyway, now it's time for the final flip through. I think this theme turned out really cute, and it was nice to experiment with the colors. I would love to hear what you think of it, so definitely let me know in the comments. Remember also to like this video if you enjoyed it, and also leave an airplane emoji in the comments if you watched till the end. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye!